Lego is a hobby that is beloved throughout the entire world. During its inception, it was seen as something that was specifically targeted towards children. But many of the kids that initially loved the hobby when they were growing up are now adults. And so today, we can safely say that it has become a hobby for all ages. It's more successful than ever, and it's just seen as this innocent little pastime that anyone from any background or age can enjoy. But what if I told you that this innocent hobby had a hand in the theft of over $200,000, involving a very suspicious police raid in which the officers were armed to the teeth with assault rifles, multiple illegal arrests, the direct participation of Patreon's CEO, and the public reveal of Mormon Mafia-style tactics that were colluding with one of the most corrupt police organizations in the country. I mean, this was such massive news that you could find it on multiple different national news channels. What the YouTuber Reckless Ben uncovered was an unprecedented level of systemic corruption aimed at the average person to silence them, to intimidate them. But he exposed it all to the world. And the world listened very intently. If you've been on the internet for like the last month, you would have most likely seen or heard of this, the Lego situation. It has gone absolutely viral and the people are outraged. At the same time though, this is a very complex and highly fluid situation that's being updated constantly. Most videos are served in chunks and there's not one that explains everything from start to finish. So seeing how much of an important topic this has become, I figured I'd make a video to talk about it. All of it. And so without further ado, let's do this. After a quick sponsor. In life, I have a simple philosophy. I love free shit. And you know which game agrees with this philosophy? Duet Night Abyss. Yes, the gacha game that stripped all gacha mechanics out from its gameplay right before release. No gacha system, no stamina system, and the only monetization is cosmetics. There are no pay-to-win elements. Like this angel skin for Flora, one of the 2 new characters coming out this update alongside Hilda. And what's even better is that they're releasing their 1.4 update with a free character selector, a free weapon selector, and countless generous events, allowing you to get another character selector as well as character skins for free. But that's not all. You'll also find new story content, a new challenging dungeon, and a major evolution of the weapon build crafting experience. And that's without mentioning that they're adding a new guild system with guild missions, channels, and an exclusive guild shop. So if that sounds interesting to you, then make sure to get the game today using the link in the description and the pinned comment to claim over 60 free weave pulls and all these other rewards I already mentioned. Thank you to DNA for sponsoring this video. Norway, a Scandinavian country west of Sweden. In geopolitical conversations, the only thing really mentioned about it is how rich it is in natural resources, most notably oil. In fact, Norway makes so much money from the sale of its natural resources that it's actually a country in profit. It actually makes money. And so, in the year 1998, this would lead them to come up with a wonderful idea. What if we take this extra profit and invest it? Whether it be stocks, projects, bonds, you name it. They would then use this money for the welfare of their citizens. It was an amazing idea and it worked brilliantly. In fact, if you were to liquidate the entire sovereign wealth fund of Norway and divide it equally among its citizens, then every single one of them would receive over 350,000 USD. Isn't that insane? Other countries would see this and quickly take notice. You'd have many of them follow the same philosophy, whether it be Australia, Singapore, or even more recently, Saudi Arabia, through their public investment fund, investing in anything from video games to Mr. Beast. But hey, it's wonderful to see these countries actually use their money somewhat responsibly. But what if instead of a country, you'd have a religion come up with the same idea? At first, it might sound silly to even suggest that, but then you realize that the Mormons did exactly that. The Mormon religion is headed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And as of 2023, the church's net worth is estimated to be around $265 billion, $250 billion owned by a religion. How the hell does this even happen? Well, a lot of it is thanks to tithing. This has been a thing for a long time, and it pretty much involves a Mormon giving away 10% of what he earned during the year to the Church of the Latter-day Saints. I guess you can call it some sort of a religious tax. Now, they say it's not mandatory, and yeah, technically, no one's really going to knock on your door and punch you in the face until you pay up. But if you don't pay, then you'll be shunned. People will probably not really want to interact with you. You'll be isolated. But more importantly, you will not have access to Mormon temples. You see, Mormon temples are these beautiful structures built all around the world. But to enter them, you need to meet very specific criteria, even if you're invited there to see someone else's wedding. One of those very strict requirements is the fact that you've been paying your tithe, your 10%. If you haven't been doing that, then you will never enter the temple. This is really important because in order to access the highest level in heaven, you have to get married in one of these temples. And if you can't do that, well, the elevator to the highest level is simply not going to work for you. This is why so many Mormons pay that 10%, and this is how the church has been able to rack up so much capital to invest. In 2026, it's estimated that their net worth is now almost $300 billion. They are the richest religion on the planet, and they're more wealthy than almost every other Christian sect combined. In fact, forget other religions, okay? They hold more assets than most countries on the planet produce in GDP. But to be fair, they don't just take from their people, they also give back. For example, BYU is regarded as the Mormon college. This is where Mormons go to study higher education, and if you meet the criteria of being a good Mormon, then the church pays 70% of your tuition. Yeah, I mean, they can afford to do that, okay? I mean, look at how many assets they hold across the United States of America. They have office spaces, residential, retail, agricultural, commercial, you name it. There's not a single state they don't do business in, okay? But if you look at where their assets are most concentrated in the entire country, then you'd probably want to zoom in here. This is the state of Utah, and they practically own that state. This isn't a conspiracy, it's simply the truth. You see, Mormonism would be founded in the 1800s by the Mormon prophet. He would successfully convert quite a few people to Mormonism, but many other Americans were not really so down with his ideas that conflicted directly with their religions. So, in classic American fashion, he got shot. This would lead his people to go in exile, leaving the United States and going to northern Mexico, which at the time still covered places like Utah, California, etc. They would kick out whichever natives were living there, and they would quickly build up a massive city by the name of Salt Lake City. Later, the US would take over this part of Mexico, and the Mormons would be integrated into American society. They've been in Utah ever since. Now, I'm sure you're probably wondering, Mugen, why the hell did you just talk to me about Mormons for the last 10 minutes? Well, first off, it's because you're watching a Mugen video. But more importantly, this leads me to what this video is about. A company by the name of Bricks and Minifigs, who just so happens to be based in Utah. This is a company that is a Lego reseller, but it doesn't sell brand new sets. It's focused on aftermarket Legos, ones that were used already. If you have old Legos, you could sell it directly to them, or you can buy some. This company was founded in 2010. However, in 2018, Ammon McNeff, who just so happened to be Mormon, came from Utah and also attended BYU, the most Mormon university in the United States, acquired the company with his brother. He would move the company headquarters immediately to Utah. But look, to Ammon's credit, this was a very highly rated chain of stores. In fact, after acquiring the company, he would grow it like crazy. In 2018, it would have a handful of stores, and by 2026, it would have over 300. They'd be a mix of directly owned stores, but also franchisee stores. And the cool thing is that anyone could become a franchisee. Their franchising model was very straightforward. It was similar to fast food franchises like McDonald's, for example. You'd have to do the legwork, right? But all it took was really finding a good location, researching your audience, sourcing your own inventory, and sharpen your business skills. This is what you can find on the Bricks and Minifigs official page for franchising. What I do want to do though is highlight point 3, which is sourcing your own inventory. When you become a franchisee for Bricks and Minifigs, you're essentially handling everything. The only thing you're really borrowing from them is their logo and reputation. And for that, you pay them a percentage of your sales. Fairly straightforward. When it comes to the actual inventory in the store though, this is fully your responsibility and you own that. Bricks and Minifigs will not be sending you any product or anything. So with the CEO's rapid expansion and this very profitable franchisee business model, by 2026, Bricks and Minifigs would become worth over $400 million. It was very impressive. It would also attract many people from many different backgrounds, including, but not limited to, Crystal. She would apply for the franchisee program with Bricks and Minifigs and be approved. Her store would end up being located in the state of Oregon, more specifically in the town of Salem. And at some point during the year of 2023, she'd be approached by a man named Brian Mansell. You see, Brian had a dad who was now in his 80s and who had decided around 20 plus years prior to invest his money in a more out-of-the-box asset class, Legos. Today, you hear people always talking about where you should invest your money, and it's usually always about stocks or bonds or commodities. But back then, in the early 2000s, people had just gone through the dot-com bubble. Confidence in the stock market was at all-time lows. So I'm sure this somewhat contributed to the decision that Brian's dad took in investing his life savings in Legos, but not just any Legos. It would be limited edition Star Wars Legos. And if you don't know much about how Lego works, well, they don't typically recreate their sets. This was something that had come out in the early 2000s, and that was that. When they were sold out, they didn't make any more. Brian's dad understood this very well and knew that in the future there would be incredible demand over these rare sets. And so he bought 780 sets and 1,200 minifigures over those years. 2 of those sets would be the Lego Star Wars Cloud City set. And as you can see, I'm on StockX right now. The lowest offer for one of these sets is 18,400 euros. And while yes, I'm sure your jaw's on the floor right now, I'd say don't get too excited, because while yes, the lowest offer is quite high, this is not a liquid market. One look at the market data and you would see that. One sold in 2022, one sold in 2023, and the last sale was May 2026 at 10,000 euros. Selling just one of these bad boys was pretty much like selling a house, okay? It doesn't happen overnight. And when you have 780 sets and 1,200 minifigures, you'd probably need to hire people in order to sell all of them effectively. This is why Brian and his dad would make the decision to go to Crystal's store in Salem, Oregon. That way, she can sell them on their behalf. But seeing that all these sets and minifigures were like around $200,000 and Crystal was responsible for her own inventory, she couldn't just flat out buy all of it, right? It's like a massive down payment for a mortgage. So what they would do instead is sign an agreement together. More specifically, one that involves consignment. This means that Brian and his dad would still own these Legos, they would be their property. However, they would be given to Crystal and her store, they would be stored for them, they would be sold for them, and in return, Crystal would take a cut. They agreed on a 65% to 35% split, with Crystal's store keeping 35% and Brian receiving 65% in the form of monthly payments whenever they would actually sell anything. This agreement would be made around the end of 2023, right? More specifically, maybe around end of October, early November. And as we can see on this Facebook post by the Salem store, they were very excited, saying that they were going to display one of the largest, most valuable privately held collections of Star Wars Lego in the world. That it would even be open to journalists and the public for photos before they would go on sale. And more importantly, they specified the collection is now estimated to be worth well over $200,000. And hey, you know what? Things were going great. For around a year, Crystal would find buyers periodically for certain sets or minifigures. When she would, at the end of every month, she would send the payments to Brian. It was a wonderful deal that benefited both parties. But, as you probably know by now, that amazing status quo would not last indefinitely. Because after 1 year of smooth sailing, Crystal would find herself kicked out of her own store with no access to her inventory, and Brian would find himself with no trace of his collection against a corporation that was threatening legal action if he asked any questions. This was the beginning of the end. On November 2024, 1 year after having signed the consignment agreement with Brian, Crystal would receive a job offer abroad with her husband. But instead of just closing down the store, she wanted to sell it back to Bricks and Minifigs corporate. So on the 14th of November, she would contact corporate and tell them, hey, listen, I have a job abroad, I'm planning to leave, how can I sell this store back to you guys? On the same day, Bricks and Minifigs would send a representative of theirs by the name of Brandon Best, this guy right here, and according to Crystal, he would seize the location immediately with no notice or no process that is actually required under their franchise agreement. He wouldn't even allow her to make inventory, see like what everything she has is worth so she can actually sell it back to corporate. This is a very important detail because the inventory is owned by the franchisee. We can see this on the franchisee steps required on the Bricks and Minifigs website. But the thing with Crystal was that one of her main concerns was how the most valuable aspects of her inventory were Brian's collection. So she asked Brandon in a very straightforward way, hey, what the hell is going to happen to things like consignment agreements? And here's what he would say.
These are ones that he has not been paid his percentage yet. And if I don't have the tickets, I won't know how much I need to pay him.
That's a business thing and not necessarily yours. He's taking on the business, he takes on all that consignment liability.
So this was Brandon, sent over by corporate saying, hey, you don't got to worry about any of this. The person taking over the franchise will handle this because this is business stuff. And the only reason we have this right now is because Crystal's security cameras were recording that night and she kept this footage. However, shortly after this, when she would push back and say, hey, I have to do inventory, you can't just take the store in one day, it goes against the agreement, she claims that she was threatened with the police and other legal procedures that would have made her broke. So she left and she lost the store that same day. She'd notify Brian about this and Brian would of course contact the store, and when he did, surprise, surprise, it would be as if amnesia struck the town of Salem. Not a single person in that store knew what he was talking about. What Star Wars set? What consignment? What is that? We know nothing about any of this. Even though there's a video from December 2024, 1 month after Crystal was forced out, that shows a massive Star Wars collection still present in the store. Additionally, his consignment contract wasn't written by ChatGPT, okay? It did have a transfer of rights clause, so if anyone would take over this franchise, they would also take responsibility for his collection and would have to keep it going. But that didn't matter. He was ghosted at this point and couldn't reach the store. He couldn't even look at the inventory. He was banned. So look, at this point, Brian had become desperate. This was what his father had left him. This was practically his inheritance. At first, he was told that no such thing exists, no agreement, no consignment exists, and then after that, he would just get ghosted. And so out of desperation, he would reach out to a YouTube channel by the name of Collecting Weekly. This is where you'd have multiple LEGO content creators get involved here to try and get his LEGO collection back. The video's description would say that his collection was mishandled and sold without proper authorization following a reported change in store ownership. This was back in April 2025. You'd even see Brian himself in the comments saying, "Can't thank you enough for getting this out there. We are going to continue to go after this deal in any way possible. I will answer any questions as well. Thanks, guys." However, even though they really tried their best to help him, their help would stop abruptly. And we only knew why recently. Hear it for yourself.
They were threatening legal action against us. Bricks and Minifigs, which is a pretty big company who probably has way more resources than we can, really put up a fight against.
So this channel with around 77,000 subscribers, who doesn't even hold that much influence, right? That much virality, would get threatened with legal action by this massive $400 million corporation because of what they were trying to do. They were trying to do a good deed here. But of course, I'm assuming if any of you watching right now, right, if you're trying to do a good deed and a $400 million company sends you a letter saying, hey, we're going to screw your life up, you'd probably back off too. But you know who wouldn't back off? The YouTuber by the name of Reckless Ben. He would find out about the situation back around 2025, and he would promise Brian that he would do everything he could to get his LEGO collection back because it was a very heartbreaking story. And so this is when Ben would get involved in this drama. One of the first things that Reckless Ben would do would be very, very simple. He would just go to the store in Oregon. He would walk in and he would ask about the Star Wars Legos that belonged to Brian. That's it. But the response that he would get from the store manager would be very interesting, as if she was pre-programmed, as if she looked out for specific keywords, and once she heard them, things would escalate very quickly. Watch it for yourself.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
It's pretty good. So basically my friend said that you guys have some of his Legos, I think, and he told me to come here and see if I could pick them up.
Who's your friend?
I think they're Brian's Legos. It's like a big Star Wars collection set, I think.
You could go ahead and leave now.
Really?
So you could go ahead and leave now, or I will call the police for harassment.
Well, I'm not harassing you.
No, you are. Hi.
Dude, how insane is that? What kind of reaction is that? Yo, I'm here for my friend's Legos. Which ones? The Star Wars ones? Leave now, or I will call the police for harassment. It's like, whoa, how did we get here? Chill. And she wasn't kidding. She would actually call the police, straight up saying she's being harassed. However, as the police were on their way, he would talk with her a bit more. She would deflect all this by saying, hey, this is a corporate matter. I'm not involved in this. I'm just the store manager. This was interesting because prior to this, Ben would actually go all the way to Utah to go to the Bricks and Minifigs HQ. And what he would hear from them was, hey, this is not our problem. This is the store's problem. Go talk to them. So essentially, Reckless Ben found himself in this never-ending loop. The store manager would tell him, hey, go to corporate, and corporate would tell him, go to the store. In other words, no one was taking accountability. Everything was just a deflection. But while Ben was waiting for the police to show up, things got even more interesting. The store manager would call the supposed new franchise owner of the store, and Ben would get an opportunity to speak with him for the first time. Here's how the conversation would go, and again, like many things during the saga, it would also escalate fairly quickly. Watch.
Are you the owner of the Bricks and Minifigs store?
Yeah, why? What you got?
So basically, I just wanted to get some of the Legos back that you guys still have. I think I'm looking for the clone turbo tank.
Why do you think you would be entitled to our inventory?
Why would you be entitled to our inventory? What makes you think that you can access this highly classified information just because you claim that your friend owns Legos? But don't worry, they would talk more during this very productive conversation.
What's his? He owns the Legos.
Huh? He doesn't own the Legos.
Well, yeah, we have a contract. He does own them.
No, bro, are you an idiot? Are you stupid?
Josh, the police are showing up right now.
Are you stupid, bro? Are you an idiot? You must be some sort of dumbass if you think you can just come here and get your friend's Legos. Ben would shortly afterwards talk to the police officer and would be given a trespassing order, which meant that if he ever stepped foot in the store ever again, he'd end up in handcuffs and in jail. When I said things escalated quickly, I wasn't exaggerating. This was his first visit at the store, and within less than 10 minutes, he could never enter it again, otherwise he'd be facing jail time. So what the hell just happened? But let's back up. Who was this person that Ben was talking to on the phone? Well, that would be Joshua Johnson. This guy would be owner number 1 of the store after Crystal had gotten, well, kicked out. We're gonna see way more of Joshua throughout the saga, so don't worry, you won't miss him. The other franchise owner involved here is Brandon Best, the guy who personally kicked Crystal out and assured her that don't worry, consignments are handled by corporate. Clearly not, as we just saw. These two became the new co-owners of this franchise after Crystal had left. But hey, Ben managed to reach the top of the food chain early on. When corporate was telling him, hey, this is the store's issue, he also got to talk to the CEO briefly. He would ask about the missing Legos and the CEO would deny their existence. Ben wouldn't believe him and say, hey, listen, are you lying to me right now? The CEO would say, no. Ben would want to re-emphasize, listen, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And by this point, Ammon, the CEO, wasn't interested in talking anymore. Thing is though, I don't think he understood what the hard way meant with the guy who's called Reckless Ben. But he was gonna find out. They were simply fooling no one. When you went on social media, you saw the store very proudly displaying the Star Wars set. Look at this community note. These items are stolen. Like, no one was fooled. And so, Reckless Ben would get to work. The first thing he would do is disrupt the business. But he would do it in a way that keeps him out of legal trouble. This was about making them understand that he's here to stay, that he was serious. He would set up a table outside the business selling merch, and that merch would be pretty much calling the store scammers. When the manager would notice him out there, she'd think, oh hell yeah, this guy has a trespass notice. I can call the police and put him in jail. This is when Ben would go to hide somewhere and bring a friend of his dressed up the same exact way as him. His friend would also get a trespass notice, but no one would end up in jail. Now yes, one could call this vigilantism. Some would even maybe call it useless, maybe even illegal. It was definitely a gray area. But the logic here was to annoy them until they gave up and gave back the Legos. That was pretty much it. But Ben had already moved on to the second plan, and that would be befriending a store employee. He would jokingly invite her to a cult, and eventually they'd meet up after she was done with her shift. Here she'd reveal some interesting information about Brian. As far as she knew, or at least what she was told, Brian was given his leftover inventory. That was false. So the store manager and whoever she was working under were lying to her. This was important info because, as I had mentioned earlier, the consignment contract had a transfer of rights clause. Joshua and Brandon were meant to take on the responsibilities that Crystal had signed on to, but they weren't. And they even lied to the employee here that they had. So they were aware of it. So after finding out that even the employees were being lied to, Ben's new friend would give him Joshua's phone number. And this is when they would get to have a one-on-one conversation. They would call. Joshua would pretend to not know what kind of contract Ben is talking about, so Ben would actually send him the entire PDF through iMessage. Here's what Josh would have to say.
What contract is it? I didn't sign a contract. I didn't sign that agreement. I didn't agree to anything in that. In order for me to be under contract, I have to sign something.
Or you had to take it over from the previous owner, right?
Nope, that's not how the law works.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
So
If that's how the law works, then sue me for it.
you don't just want to give the Legos back? Like,
Sue me. Let's go to court. I'm calling the police right now, and you guys are going to be arrested for harassment.
or do you feel threatened right now?
Yeah.
Joshua was feigning ignorance on purpose, and as you can see, he was taunting Ben to sue him. If Ben were to sue Joshua over some business contract, this would end up in civil court. The reason why Joshua wants this outcome is because he can use the company resources to financially bully Ben and anyone who dares to sue him by making the case as long as financially burdensome as possible. When Ben would tell Brian about this, Brian would say, yeah, I mean, I've been through this. I spoke with a couple of different attorneys and they told me the same thing. If you sue them, they will financially ruin you. So he gave up on the idea. But Ben wasn't called Reckless Ben for just no reason. He wasn't going to give up. And so instead of suing Bricks and Minifigs, he came up with a plan to have Bricks and Minifigs sue him instead. How would he do that? All right, listen. Focus with me here. He would make a company called We Steal From Old People using the same Bricks and Minifigs logo. And he would actually get inspired by the way Bricks and Minifigs work, or at least what he's been told so far. He'd register 5 different franchises under his new company that belonged to his friends, and he would do exactly what he did before, becoming a nuisance. He'd set up tables outside of the store with different merch, calling them thieves. And he'd even bring out court papers that were already filled out so that they could just sue him immediately. When the police would show up to stop his friend from being able to sell this merch, his friend would use the same tactic Bricks and Minifigs have been using. Oh, actually, I'm a franchisee and I can't really do much. This is corporate's decision. Corporate in this case is Ben. And so they couldn't really charge anyone with anything. This was them pretty much baiting Bricks and Minifigs to think, okay, well, we can't stop these guys unless we sue them. And when you initiate a lawsuit like this, it costs a lot of money. This was bait. After this whole ordeal, Reckless Ben would be able to meet up with the CEO again. Ammon here is clearly pissed, saying, hey, listen, this harassment style you're conducting yourself in, you're disturbing business, this is not the right way to do things. And so Ben would explain to him, hey, listen, man, I'm just doing what you're doing. I have franchises registered in Oregon, and every time the police are sent with a problem, I just redirect them to another franchisee. And so this was Ammon's reaction once he understood what he was dealing with.
Appreciate that you think you're being very clever and that you think that you can do all sorts of fun stuff this way, but it's like you have no business being here. So
well, we do have business. We have, like, you guys have a bunch of our Legos.
all right.
So look, I think it was finally starting to set in to the CEO just who he was dealing with here. But while yes, it is really funny, to Ben, this wasn't really leading anywhere. The CEO clearly knew what was going on and knew that he was being baited to sue, so he wasn't simply going to do that. And so we move on to the next plan, the raffle strategy. Raffles in the US have to follow a very specific set of rules. If you fail to abide by those rules, you don't face civil court, you face criminal court. Ben would figure, well, listen, since these Star Wars sets are held in consignment, this means that Brian still owns them. They're his property. So if we put them up for a raffle that costs $1 to enter with random strangers, we can legally do that. And if we go to the store to get that Lego and the manager refuses to give it to us, well, that's criminal. Honestly, I'm not a lawyer, but this plan was actually very smart. Legally speaking, it holds up. And so when he went to the store to get the prize and the manager called the police like she always does, the officer talking to Ben actually took it seriously. He was like, wait, like, okay, well, shit, if you know, I saw the contract, it's in consignment, this is an illegal raffle, this is criminal, all right, cool. I'll look into this. Unfortunately, though, one of the other officers would go up to that officer taking it seriously, would whisper something in his ear, and then all of a sudden, the entire demeanor would change. It seemed that these cops were corrupt, and they had no interest in actually upholding the law. In fact, what was even crazier here is that this officer whispering things in that other guy's ear would end up taking control of the situation and tell Ben straight up, listen, give this up and we can all walk away. But if you keep going, you'll end up in jail.
First off, we do have the authority to do this raffle, so we are legally...
Are we done for the night?
No, it's actually required by you guys to investigate this. And it's not civil, it's criminal.
Just so we're talking in circles, right?
Yep. No.
Do you understand at least what he told you on the...
I don't know, we're talking in circles. That's the first time we've got falsifying a raffle.
Ben, just answer my question, please. Do you understand what Officer Bev has explained to you? Kind of what's going to happen, what's going to be the next steps?
I think...
Nope. Yes or no?
No, I'm not understanding.
You don't understand? What part don't you understand?
Yeah, I was pretty confused on what they were going to arrest me for. I mean, the Fourth Amendment in our Constitution specifically states that the police can't arrest you if they don't have a reason. I keep asking them for a reason, but they can't tell me anything that I'm doing that's illegal.
Well, I don't think we broke the law.
That's your opinion. That part doesn't matter. Here, it's pretty black and white.
Because right now, you guys said the law we broke is the falsifying the raffle.
So let's do this. Let's just call it, and we'll just go from here, all right, guys?
Guys, we didn't break the law. That's your opinion. But we literally didn't. We're not falsifying anything. We have the contract. All right, guys, let's call it a day. let's just go our separate ways and forget any of this happened. Yes, when you pay taxes and the taxes go to the police, this is what you hope for. You hope that they ignore the law and just tell you to leave. And that's exactly what was happening on camera. So even though this was a genius plan, it would again fail. Ben was back to square one. So his next plan involved actually measuring the sign outside of the store that said buy, sell, trade and replacing it with steal, sell, trade, continuing with his barely legal, slightly illegal antics. But as he was planning to do that, he would actually receive a call from Joshua. And this is where things would start to get pretty interesting.
Josh ended up giving me a call.
You guys keep coming to the store. You park out front. You do fake raffles. You're threatening my business, you moron.
Josh seems pretty scared, and he should be. Eventually, I am going to end up solving all of the police corruption that's going on. And once that happens, Josh is no longer going to be in civil trouble. He's going to be in criminal trouble.
It wasn't a fake raffle. It was a real lottery scheme, according to Oregon state law. And it actually is a Class B felony, up to 10 years in prison and a $250,000 fine.
Yeah, the loophole he's been using this entire time, just hiding behind the fact that it's a civil case, isn't going to work for him much longer.
Well, let's not argue that. I don't want to... It's just better to just say, hey, you're not a thief. You know what I mean? Definitions of whether it's stolen or not, I don't think, anyway, it's not stolen.
So look, it was clear. He was starting to crumble. No, there was no theft, guys. No, none of that. Let's not talk semantics here. Let's not talk specific words here. No crime actually occurred, all right? He finally understood what he was dealing with, and so he finally took them seriously.
If you think it's illegal, why don't you sue me? It's a civil matter. Tell Brian to put his money where his mouth is. Let's go to court.
Okay, you want to do double or nothing?
What are you talking about? Are you stupid?
If you're wrong, you pay us double. If I'm wrong, I pay you double.
Bro, are you dumb? You're obviously a kid. You don't know how this works.
I think you're scared. Double or nothing, let's do it.
You're so dumb, bro.
I think you're scared.
Okay, I'm not scared.
Let's do double or nothing.
I'm not doing
If you lose, you pay us $400,000. You're scared. You're a chicken. I'm calling you out. You're scared. I'm calling you out.
Bro, quit being stupid.
You're too scared. You're scared.
Okay, do you want me to
put your money where your mouth is.
This is really where he would realize, dude, oh no, this guy's crazy. Like, I cannot reason with Ben. Like, I my threats, they usually work, but not this time. And so watch him flip a 180 right now.
Are you just going to be a pussy, or are you going to...
I'm putting my money where my mouth is. You put your money where your mouth is.
Okay, let me talk.
Okay.
When Brian first came in, we identified anything that was on that list that would have been his that Amanda didn't sell, and we set it aside. And it's still sitting there. We're happy to give you your stuff back. I just don't want any more damage to...
Wow. Well, that was easy. It turns out they had everything to begin with.
I'm happy to give you the inventory. It's only bringing me harm because you guys are doing wackadoo crap trying to attack us.
Well, it looks like we won, and Brian is finally getting his Legos back.
All right, well, wonderful. If anything, this proves to us that Joshua is a piece of shit, something that will only get worse throughout the video. But yeah, essentially, he had admitted that the inventory was there. They just chose to not give it back because they're assholes. And he was still choosing to hold it hostage because he had conditions to give those sets back to Brian. The first thing he wanted from Brian was an apology, a written apology. What is this apology for? Well, it's because of a Facebook post that Brian had made that got like 55 likes, where he called Bricks and Minifigs thieves. The second condition would be removing the bad reviews left on Google, and the third condition would be replacing them with good reviews. Now, Ben would have a problem with this whole written apology thing. He didn't want to give anything to Joshua that could be used in court if this were to go to court one day. So he asked Joshua if a video apology was good enough, and he said yes. And so then Ben's friend would apologize on video, and they'd use AI to put Brian's face on him, right? So that way, this video is inadmissible in court. This video would get sent to Joshua, and he would have no idea that it's AI. He'd be satisfied with it. But then he would throw on a fourth condition on top of everything he's already asked for.
I want to give it back to him. That's the long and the short of it. We've run me over. I'm good. We got to win Amanda over, right? Apologize to Amanda.
Okay. I guess Brian's just a little worried that you guys are just going to keep postponing it until...
No. You're going to get him. You're going to get him. I'm not going to screw you. You have my word. That's not who I am. I promise you. I swear to God.
You have my word. I promise. I swear to God. A Mormon swearing to God. That must mean something in this day and age, right? Well, here was the problem. At this point, Reckless Ben thinks that this is a trap. This is because Amanda has shown absolutely zero will to cooperate. She's the one who called the police on Ben within like a minute of him walking into the store. So he thought that, hey, am I being set up here? Is Joshua trying to send me to the store? That way the police show up and arrest me for trespassing. Some might call this paranoid, but he had reason to believe this. In any case, he would go to the store because, well, this was the final step, apparently, before Brian could finally get his set back. And as you might have imagined, Amanda, the store manager, would call the police on him immediately. The funny thing is, though, the police wouldn't even show up. They got tired of these antics. They understood that this was getting very tricky, and that last altercation they had with them about the raffle, it was clear they were panicking. They wanted nothing to do with this anymore, so it simply didn't work. Thankfully, Reckless Ben and his friend didn't get in trouble, but Amanda was not budging. But hey, you know what? Everything worked out in the end because Joshua was satisfied.
Ben, how's it going?
It's good. So we walked in, we were like, hey, we're sorry. We have permission to come back here and like apologize. And she's like, I'm calling the cops. And she like starts.
Josh now realizes that his last-ditch plan to get me arrested, well, that plan didn't work.
I'm sorry Amanda did that. Thank you for doing that. Let's get this done.
Wow, it worked out. You know what? Hey, maybe this has a happy ending, right? Well, no, it doesn't, obviously. We're here, right? And the video isn't even halfway done, I'm pretty sure by now. Ben would go back to LA, and he'd be the one calling the store every single day to check if the Legos are ready for Brian to pick them up, because Brian's phone number is blocked at the Salem store in Oregon. The person replying to these phone calls would be Brandon Best, the second owner of that store. And every single day would be the same thing. It will be Brandon stalling. Like, yeah, you know, we're getting on it. We're almost done. We're getting there. We just, had a small delay, etc., etc. And this would go on for many, many days until Ben would just straight up get ghosted. No one would be replying to his phone calls anymore, almost as if his number also got blocked too. It seemed like Amanda not agreeing to make peace with Ben was truly affecting this, or that's at least what Ben thought. He would try his best to go back and apologize to her, sign a peace treaty with her, whatever. But every single time he would walk in the store and try to talk to her, she would threaten him with police for harassment, for all sorts of things. Ben at this point really wanted this deal that he had established with Joshua to work. He wanted those Legos to be back in Brian's hands. So he would call him to try and find out what's going on. And this is when Joshua would again flip another 180 entirely and go back on his word and him swearing to God.
When we took over that store, there was nothing in that store. The shelves were empty. I don't know why you guys are thinking we're the bad guys.
So we just went from, yeah, you know what, I'll give Brian everything, I love the guy, please just stop messing with my store, to, guys, when we took over the store, it was empty, dude. Like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. It's like you're speaking to two different people. It's like this guy has a multi-personality disorder or something. Ben must have felt like he was in the Twilight Zone.
I'm wrong, but you can sue me for it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the long and the short of it.
So you know you're wrong. So you know that you stole the Legos then.
Let's go to court then.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, is that what you want?
Yeah.
You really want that?
I mean, I would like to just get the Legos back, but if that's what you want, I mean, it seems like this is what you want. I'm giving you every out that I can, but...
Let's just not go down. Look.
Dang.
Don't go down that route. It doesn't really matter because...
I just want to get the Legos back. They're Brian's Legos. Give them back. It's pretty easy.
Then you can go f*** yourself.
Dang.
Man, you stole them, bitch.
I stole the Legos?
Yeah, you're a fucking thief.
Dang.
Okay?
Okay.
You can shut the fuck up. That's your fucking choice.
This thing is a roller coaster, and we haven't even gotten to the assault rifles wielded by police officers raiding Ben's home. But just like many times throughout this journey so far, Reckless Ben found himself at square one again. He was faced with two choices. The first one is walking away, the second one is suing, needing hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawyer fees, and this lasting for maybe like around 2 or more years in court. None of these two choices sounded attractive whatsoever. And so this is when Ben would come up with his master plan: small claims court. Small claims court in the US is something that helps people resolve money disputes quickly and without the need for a lawyer. This is really something made for the average little man, one that is standing up to a bigger corporation but cannot afford a lawyer, and typically corporations in these cases will lose, as long as you have the proof, of course. The caveat, though, is that they only handle cases involving amounts under $10,000. But we're dealing with a collection here that's worth $200,000, and we're dealing with half of it, so $100,000. How the hell would you do that? Well, he would decide to sue the store 10 different times. He and his friends would take up credit card loans, $10,000 each. They would give them to Brian, and since Brian still technically owns these sets through consignment, he had the ability to sell it to them. And since now they were the owners of Lego sets that had disappeared, they could each sue in small claims court for $10,000 each, amounting to $100,000 against Bricks and Minifigs. This was something that they held no hope in winning. And the cool thing about small claims court is that it's pretty fast too. It doesn't take 2 years, it takes way less than that. Now, if you're wondering how Ben and his friends would pay off these $10,000 credit card loans, which are at like 20+% interest, well, there's no sales tax in Oregon. So 10,000 is 10,000, right? And so Brian would just give them back the money as a loan, zero interest loan. So this really was genius. Again, I'm not a lawyer here. A lawyer would probably facepalm and shit himself at the same time, but man, I mean, they just gamed the system. And as expected, because Bricks and Minifigs were in the wrong here, they would lose all these lawsuits. But don't celebrate yet, because guess what? The Salem store would quote-unquote temporarily close. It would shut down. It hasn't been open since then. This was to avoid paying back anything in that small claims court. So Ben had somewhat won, but he had won too well. He managed to, well, destroy this franchise, but without getting his money back, which was in the end not really a win. As you'll see later in the video, this was a strategy that Ammon, as well as his good old friends, would employ all the time whenever they got into any trouble, closing and opening up companies so that they never have to suffer any consequences. But Ben wasn't simply going to stop here, okay? The store closed, but this was a victory, and he was going to let the world know. So he would print out this massive announcement and put it right at the store. The sign would say, "Permanently closed. We stole a family's life savings. They sued, we lost. By closing the store, we get out of having to pay the family what we owe them." Soon enough, this would go absolutely viral around the internet. And bear in mind, this was done back in 2025. Reckless Ben's first video, which we just talked about, came out on May 21st, 2026, so people have been aware about the store for over a year now in certain circles. But this video would be the true catalyst that would spread it far and wide. But as shocking as some of the events that occurred in this video were, it was nothing compared to what the second video would do to the internet, because there, we didn't just deal with a shady company, we dealt with a shady police department too, escalating this to unbelievable levels. On May 21st, around the same day the first video would come out, Ben would also release part 2 on his Patreon. seeing that many people were impressed with his very interesting and untraditional type of investigation techniques, they would support him and would watch part 2. This video would be so shocking, such an escalation of what had occurred in the first video, that even though it was behind a paywall, it would practically leak everywhere, okay? The details would be visible to just about anyone following this story. So even though this video would only release on May 30th on his YouTube channel, people already knew, okay? This guy had an assault rifle pointed at him because of a Lego investigation. Alright, so look, here was the situation. The small claims court hearing didn't work because the store closed down before they could pay them the damages. And so, Ben would decide to take the fight directly to the franchise co-owners, so he would personally sue both Joshua Johnson and Brandon Best in small claims. However, in order to sue them this way, the court wanted to see a good faith effort from Ben to resolve the dispute before this lawsuit can go forward. So in other words, he had to prove to the court that he at least tried to resolve this with a conversation or something before actually bringing it to court. Which meant that now Ben had to travel to Utah because that's exactly where both Joshua and Brandon lived. He was headed to Mormon territory, baby. However, before trying to make contact with both Brandon and Joshua, Ben would decide to pass by, just real quick, the HQ since he was in Utah now. Maybe have another conversation with the CEO, let him know what he was doing, give him updates, see if he wanted to resolve things peacefully still. But this time, the police would be called on him, and he would be told to leave the property immediately. Alright, fine, no worries. Let's head to Joshua's house now. They'd go there and see him outside of his home on the phone. Most likely, right, we can theorize here, the HQ was letting him know, hey, these guys, they're probably headed your way now. But before Ben could even initiate contact with Joshua, which is required for his lawsuit, he'd notice 2 different police cars headed his way. And no, he wasn't paranoid. These cars were here for him. They would stop the car under the pretext of them not stopping at a stop sign. Ben would later ask for the footage of this incident, right? To see, like, did they actually fail to stop at the stop sign? And no, it was bullshit. They actually did. So this was the beginning, right? The tip of the iceberg of the corrupt actions that the American Fork PD, this is the name of the police department involved, would take against Ben and his friends. After talking for a while, they would trespass everyone in the car, okay? Which meant that if they ever found themselves on or near Joshua's property, they were being arrested. Just keep in mind here, they hadn't even stepped foot on his house. They were already off to a great start. The next thing Ben would do would go, well, to the other co-owner, which was Brandon Best. And this time he'd actually answer and there would be no police cars waiting for him. However, even with Ben trying his best to communicate, Brandon would just remain nonverbal. He would just sit there looking in the distance and not saying a word. The police would show up later, of course. Now, what's really interesting to me here is that as Ben was speaking to one of the police officers, she'd be talking about Brandon as if she was very aware of who he is and of the situation he found himself in. Almost like she was defending him. Watch for yourself.
He didn't steal anything. He inherited the store from somebody else.
No, he stole $200,000
How do you know this?
Because I've been spending the last 3 months in the case and I won in court.
He inherited the store. He's being blamed for everything that the previous owner did. And he's trying
well,
to
that's a lie. So we.
Okay, hold on. I'm still
okay,
talking.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'm sorry. Is this a police officer or is this his wife or sister or something? This sounds like a family member defending him in court. Very interesting. And of course, as you might have guessed, Ben also got trespassed for Brandon's property. However, there was some good news. Since he actually went face to face with Brandon and Brandon refused to talk, he was able to upload this proof to the court, and this was enough. This was enough to prove that he had tried to resolve this in a good faith conversation. However, he wasn't even able to talk face to face to Joshua. And so, the roller coaster continued. So look, this is when Ben, who was probably naive to Mormons in Utah, would find out that actually, both Brandon and Joshua were Mormons. This is something that Brian would point out, like, hey, by the way, like, they all just happen to be Mormons. And so Ben would get another brilliant idea. He's just full of them. He'd find the church, the Mormon church that Joshua goes to every week, and he would find someone that works there, most likely a missionary or something, someone who volunteers. And he'd tell him about the whole story, about how Joshua swore to God that he didn't steal anything or that he was going to give back what he stole, along with all the chain of events that have led him here today. But what happened next is like something out of a weird drug-related crime series or something. I felt like I was watching Breaking Bad. The guy from the church that went to Joshua's house, Joshua wouldn't even speak to him. He wouldn't even open the door. He would call the police immediately. This was Mormon on Mormon violence, and the police would tell this guy to leave the property. And as this was happening, Ben and his friends would get stopped by multiple police vehicles. The officers would conduct a full search of their vehicle and would have them wait outside. This would last for multiple hours, around 3 hours, as they also made them undergo a drug test. It seemed like there was no shortage to the intimidation tactics that both Joshua and Brandon were employing, and it also seemed like this police force was in their pockets. Fork PD was compromised. Even after passing the drug tests, the police wouldn't let them go until they told them where the drugs were, or whatever that means. After this incident, Ben would request body cam footage. Everyone can do that, okay? It's a public right. But much of it was redacted, much of it was cut, which was very suspicious. That's only done in extreme cases to protect a victim. Now, during a routine drug check, it almost seemed like these officers had something to hide. Maybe the fact that this was an illegal stop and that they were illegally trying to pressure Ben and his friends to admit that they had drugs so that they can arrest them and they can stop messing with Joshua and Brandon. In any case, this whole debacle would be described to the court by Ben, saying, hey, listen, I tried my best to talk to Joshua, but this happened, and hey, this also got approved. So now all that remained was serving the court papers to both Brandon and Joshua. But Ben would focus solely on Joshua. He was the one he was speaking to all this time after all, and he was the one who swore to him and then still lied to him. But how could he serve him court papers if he's trespassed off his property? Well, if you didn't understand yet, Ben had a way of coming up with some very creative ideas. Ben would get the brilliant idea of printing out the face of Joshua with an evil laugh, with the quote next to him saying, "I stole a dying man's life savings." He would make it into a sign and put it right in front of Joshua's property, his house, on the adjacent street, right? Not directly on his property, on the adjacent street, on a small public lot. Okay, so he'd argue that he was doing this legally on a public lot and he was only expressing his First Amendment rights. In reality, this was being done to lure him out of his home so that he can serve him with his court papers. Now look, some of you might think this is vigilantism, some of you might think this is a bit too over the top, crossing a line, hell, maybe even harassment. But here's the thing, if you're not American, then maybe you don't understand the significance of being served. You see, for a lawsuit to begin, you need to serve the person that you're suing. And this person, right, if they're smart enough, they can avoid you forever. You go to the registered address, oops, they're not there. You go to the place they work at, oops, they're not there. Effectively stalling justice for as long as they want to. Now, there are, of course, cases where you can serve by email, but you have to make the case to the judge and the judge has to approve it. It's not given all the time, only in special cases. And so many people choose to hire someone like a process server, an individual who specializes in delivering legal documents. Ben had a process server with him, and this idea of baiting someone in order to give them documents is actually quite normal, unfortunately, in the US legal system. In fact, let me give you an example that happened on a live stream. This involves a live streamer by the name of Scuffed Justin Carey, right? He was being sued by another streamer for both stalking and harassment. However, he'd always keep avoiding being served court documents. And so, a process server would be hired, and just look at this. It's incredible how he managed to get him his papers served. Watch.
Are you SPC? What? Are you SPC? I am. Oh my god, you read this. You're gonna love this. What is this? You've been served. Oh, why? Wait.
This process server would find him through the live stream. He would stream snipe him, but it wouldn't end there because then he would want to get his attention, be like, "Oh my god, is that you?" Pretending to be a fan. Also that he can read the document right in front of him, and so then in court he could say, "Yes, Your Honor, this person was served." And if he doesn't show up to the court date, then hey, there's no excuses. The streamer then realizes, oh fuck, I just got served, and pouts for the rest of this clip. So as I mentioned, Reckless Ben would be with his own process server. She's sitting in the car and she was approving of this. This was legal. And yes, I'm sure process servers have endless stories at parties over how they served an individual, whether they dressed up as a delivery man, whether they faked having a heart attack. I don't know. It's a crazy world out there. And even though Ben would be there for a specific legal reason, wanting to serve Joshua with documents, even though he had a process server with him, the cops would be called on him. Not once, not twice, not even 3 times. They'd be called on him for a total of 4 times within the span of like an hour. The first time he'd explain the situation, they would leave shortly after. The second time, another set of police would show up. They'd get explained the situation, they would also leave. But now here's the very important thing here. The third time the police would show up, they would say, you know what? You want to serve Joshua? Give me the documents, I'll serve him for you. Wonderful. A police officer can totally do this. Shortly afterwards, though, the police would come back to him, and here's what they would say, handing him back those papers.
Sure what this is. I've never seen something like that. To be honest with you.
These are court papers.
Okay. It doesn't have a judge's name or anything like that on it?
Because it hasn't gotten to the judge yet. So this is serving him, and then we'll go to the court, and then the judge will be there. So the judge.
Ben was explaining to the police how serving papers work, how a court case works. Isn't that incredible? The Fork PD Police Department had yet again broken the law here. Police can't simply refuse to serve someone papers, and that's exactly what happened. When Joshua would ask of body cam footage of this officer, like what exactly he did with these papers, it would of course also be redacted, as if it was protecting him and hiding his actions. But the police genuinely had no excuse, okay? The fourth time they would show up to talk to Ben, they would take these papers and then would actually call the court directly to verify its authenticity. And guess what would happen? The court would say, yes, that's actually a case. This is on body cam. This wasn't even redacted.
Thank you for holding. How can I help you?
Trying to speak with someone to verify if a case is, just verify if a case is real.
Yeah, looks like a real small claims case in our court.
Okay, thank you for your help. That's all for today. Thank you.
So when the police officer was handed these documents, he'd say, I've never seen something like this before. I think you're lying to me. They're fake. They would then verify that they're real. At this point, there are no excuses. What does Fork PD decide to do here? Did they decide to finally do the right thing because there's no way out of this? No. They would unironically just decide to arrest Ben. I'm not even joking. After this call, after verifying the authenticity of this court case, they would put him in handcuffs and arrest him. No reason given. Let's go. You know what's really funny too? When you get arrested, you're meant to be read your Miranda rights. Like, hey, you have the right to remain silent, whatever. He wouldn't even be read anything. Dude, he would just get handcuffed and put in the car. He'd end up in jail without even having the Miranda rights read to him and without even knowing why. The Mafia in New York back in the 1950s was less corrupt than this, and that's saying something. When Brian would find out about this, he would tell Ben that he had a theory. Brandon and Josh, as well as Ammon, they were all Mormon, and they donated millions of dollars to the Mormon church, right? The good old 10% tithe. And coincidentally, all the officers involved in the Fork PD station were also Mormon, and they all knew each other. It's a small world in Utah. All of a sudden, this very stupid ass Lego drama had become a very far-reaching conspiracy of massive corruption undergoing here. So like after Ben would be released from jail, he would yet again find himself at square one, something that he had done multiple times already. But this time, seeing just how corrupt the police force was, he would somewhat feel helpless a little bit over the idea of getting the Legos back. That's when he would decide to start a GoFundMe to recuperate the money instead, because these Legos, I mean, the police was against him. But in typical Ben fashion, he wanted to advertise this GoFundMe. He wanted to get the most amount of money for Brian. So what did he decide to do? He decided to print this image again of Joshua laughing his ass off at stealing money from an old man to place it next to Joshua's home. This would serve as publicity. And of course, as you might expect, the police would yet again be called. What was interesting here, though, was that out of the 2 police officers, one of them would agree that what was being done here was legal, and the other one wouldn't. So there was a disagreement even between police officers. Much of the body cam footage in this incident was also redacted, but Ben would find something that wasn't redacted that would put them in trouble. Watch this clip.
There's audio, so when you sync the 2 clips together, I can actually hear what they're saying here.
He sees it or give it back? Is it an occasional crime? Is it disorderly conduct? Why? Is he upset about it? I mean, I guess, but that's not.
Yeah, this police officer is right. Just because this might make Josh upset does not make this poster illegal. So
this finally gave us some sort of an understanding about what was going on here. Oh, is it making Joshua upset? Let's find a crime to pin on these guys to make them stop. What is it, disorderly conduct or something? It was incredible to just see this in a clip like this. This wasn't even redacted. It's both surprising to see just how deep the corruption goes, but also it makes you think, well, if this wasn't redacted, what are they how much worse is the footage that's being redacted then? But hey, it gets worse. At some point, one of the police officers would ask Ben's friend, hey, hand me your phone. And when his friend would lock the phone before giving it, he'd get arrested for such a dumb reason, tampering with evidence. The guy was just locking his phone, not destroying it. So now his friend was being sent to jail. No Miranda rights read to him, no reason given. It was ridiculous at this point. But this was actually nothing compared to what was going to happen next. You see, Ben wasn't from Utah. I think that's pretty obvious. None of his friends were. But when they arrived here, they had rented an Airbnb while they tried to serve Joshua and get on with this lawsuit to get the Legos back or to get the money back. So after setting up the GoFundMe and having that altercation with the police over the sign that they had put up on the fence, they would get back to the Airbnb and chill. And while they were chilling, they were completely oblivious to the fact that the Fork PD Police Department was about to initiate a raid on them with straight up assault rifles. I mean, look at this. They just straight up went in there with pistols, assault rifles, as if they were doing some sort of a drug bust on the cartel or something. They would drag them out, and Ben's shoulder would get dislocated right here with such force when there was no resistance whatsoever. This reminded Ben of the conversation he had with Joshua back in the first video. How Joshua was saying, yeah, I'll pin this all on you. I'll make you the thief. You stole the Legos. Because guess what? This search warrant that made them go with assault rifles and pistols and made them handcuff everyone outside of the house, treating them like criminals, was for stolen Legos. They were alleging that Ben and his friends had over $200,000 in stolen Legos with them. Absolute bullshit. Nothing more than another attempt at an intimidation tactic to make them back off, just like with the whole drug stop thing. But it wouldn't just stop there. Every single one of Ben's friends, including himself, would be arrested. They'd be put in a police car and sent to jail. Every single one of them was sent to a jail cell, and Ben was questioned. Like, seriously, like, what is this? It turns out the Mormon Mafia was not a conspiracy theory by any means. They'd interrogate Ben until they found out about the GoFundMe, and then they would start questioning all his friends, asking them, was this Ben's idea? This is what they wanted. They wanted to pin the GoFundMe on Ben and use that as some sort of reason to keep him in jail, which they fully intended to do. Within a day, they would release all his friends, but they would keep Ben in jail. He was meant to stay there for 30 days, no bail, until he could face a court case alleging stalking and harassment towards Joshua. Again, I wish I was making this up. I wish this was a joke, but no, this actually happened. But Ben would get extremely lucky because the judge presiding over the case would think, wait, what do you mean no bail? And would give him bail, set at $2,500. Now look, at this point, Ben would be released from jail. Okay? After having had assault rifles pointed to his face and a dislocated shoulder, yeah, he'd be a free man. But one day later, I mean, seriously, this only gets worse. One day later, the police would post a warrant for Ben's arrest. A friend of his would call the Utah Police Department, the Fork PD Police Department, and ask about this, and they'd say that this time, the judge approved a no bail jail term because the court had somehow found out that he was a threat to the physical safety of a protected person. So, in this case, we're talking about Joshua. And when it came to the court case itself, he was facing up to a maximum of 5 years in jail if he lost. They wanted to charge him with stalking, a Class A misdemeanor, which means it's right under a felony, and targeted residential picketing, a Class B misdemeanor. So knowing that there was a warrant out for his arrest and knowing that he had no bail if he got arrested, he would stay in jail for like an entire month up until this court date, Ben fled to Mexico. Dude, seriously, I wish I was making this up. This was all over Legos. This was genuinely all over Legos. Like, can we just remember how we started with this? This dude was being treated like he was part of the cartel, selling kilograms of cocaine or something. Do you now understand why this went viral? He got assault rifles pointed at him for Legos. He's facing over 5 years of jail time in a no bail situation over Legos. This was a guy trying to take someone to small claims court, something made for the small, lower middle class guy who wants to go up against a corporation, and this was the treatment he was receiving by a police department. Yeah, no wonder everyone's making videos about this, including myself. This is something that should be spread far and wide. This is unacceptable. I've seen dictatorships with more fair laws and police departments than this. Like, are you kidding me? And so, with so much awareness being raised about this, with everyone talking about this, the outrage was palpable, and accountability was at the top of the priority list for anyone involved in this. And so, humanity had found hope and justice again as consequences started to come in violently when it came to Bricks and Minifigs and what they had done leading up to this point. It would be unprecedented, with even the police having to make a statement. Look, Bricks and Minifigs were now completely fair game to the entire internet, and so people did some digging. It would turn out that scamming and legal threats were, at this point, in Bricks and Minifigs' DNA. There's this one YouTuber by the name of MGS Brick, and in 2025, he'd go to his local Bricks and Minifigs store with a $1,000 Star Wars Lego figurine. Now, this was distinctly different from another figurine that looks fairly similar that's worth $100, but the main difference is what's on the print, and anyone practically would know that if they were into Legos. When he'd go to the store, he'd be told that his figurine is fake. The employee he spoke to that he was trying to sell this to essentially was telling him, yeah, this is fake, trying to undermine how much it actually costs. Now, interestingly enough, at first, he'd be reached out to by corporate, but they wouldn't threaten to sue him or anything. No, they'd say, listen, I want to acknowledge that what happened is not normal. This shouldn't have happened. And the person who wrote this email was Matt McNeff. Yes, Eamon McNeff's brother. But when MGS Brick signaled interest in collabing with Reckless Ben, Bricks and Minifigs would take notice and would send a completely different email. In it, they'd say, you're receiving this email directly because it has been brought to our attention that through MGS Bricks, you have communicated with Reckless Ben about potentially creating peak content involving Bricks and Minifigs and the situation he has been publicizing. Please consider this email to you a formal notice not to involve yourself, your platform, your audience, etc., 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 in any coordinated activity involving Reckless Ben, his associates, or any claims he's making against Bricks and Minifigs. So this was them continuing on with their strategy that they've always employed, intimidation, and using the law to bully people from ever being able to speak out against them. And speaking of intimidation, we'd hear from another franchise owner who had something very similar happen to him in comparison to Crystal. He would express wanting to sell his store, right? He wanted to move on and do something else. He's just like Crystal, visited by Brandon Best. Now, this ex-owner is thinking to himself, okay, well, I got to do inventory and see how much it's worth and sell it to you guys. And Brandon seemed to be on board. He's like, yeah, sure. I mean, that's part of the contract. It's part of the agreement. But I can't agree to anything until you receive a letter from legal. And so the next day, this ex-owner would receive this letter, and it would pretty much say, because you owe us rent and fees, and because you've broken the franchisee agreement, you owe us a fine of $70,000, which coincidentally was almost the exact value of his inventory of Legos in the store. He, of course, would deny the fact that he had breached the agreement in any way, shape, or form, but this really showed us how they operated. This was the Mormon Mafia fully at play right before our very eyes. And it wasn't just limited to adults either. Someone would post on Reddit how back in 2023, when they were 15, Bricks and Minifigs threatened to sue him. More specifically, suing him because someone else opened a store. It was based on a non-compete clause, even though this dude was a minor. I mean, he hadn't signed a non-compete clause or anything like that. And he wasn't even the one who opened the store. It was obvious that Bricks and Minifigs held zero respect to the law, zero respect to anyone but themselves, and have been getting away with it for years. At the same time, though, they were also banking on the fact that even with Reckless Ben's antics, they were also going to get away with it too. On May 28th, Reckless Ben would upload the video titled, I Got Bricks and Minifigs Leaked Email. And this was an email sent to all franchisees from corporate. It was not meant to be public. And in it, they would claim that they were being deliberately targeted by multiple content creators framing themselves as the victims. They would also claim that they weren't going to be defensive anymore, they were going to be offensive, saying that they were taking aggressive action behind the scenes towards anyone involved in this trying to ruin their name. They'd share records with local police, Oregon State Police, the FBI, and the US Postal Inspection Service. They'd also claim that they're preparing a temporary restraining order on Ben with cease and desists all over his content to come. And what really shows us that there was no self-awareness whatsoever from corporate, they would claim that this is just a phase. They'd outline how the biggest issue with internet drama takes 2 to 3 days, and then in the coming weeks, it quickly dissipates. But they seem to be completely oblivious over the fact that Reckless Ben is not going to just let this die though. He's planning to release multiple videos in the coming weeks, including a part 3 to his 2-part series that had already come out. So this internal email was nothing more than an attempt at damage control from Bricks and Minifigs corporate. Additionally, on the same day, what they would publicly release would be a blog post titled Response to Customer Inquiries Regarding Bricks and Minifigs Salem, Oregon, Clarity and Resolution of an Isolated and Former Franchisee's Private Civil Dispute. So already in the title, they would want to make this seem like this was isolated to the franchisee, that corporate and the name of the brand, everything involving it, had nothing to do with this. In fact, when we scroll down and we see what is false here, what they claim is false, it would be the most pathetic attempts at deflection I've ever seen. First, they say that they acknowledge that Brandon Best said, hey, the new owner would take all that consignment liability when the store ownerships changed hands from Crystal. But then they say, oh yeah, I mean, he said that, but he wasn't committing in any way the company to any agreement, okay? Our approach from the start has been simple. Any inventory that doesn't belong to us should go back to its rightful owner. Okay, then where are Brian's Legos? They would then deny the fact that they stole the collection, and even more interestingly would say, hey, the collection was not worth $200,000, all right? It was somewhere in the range of $60,000 to $80,000. That's funny and very convenient, especially seeing that there were multiple social media posts of Bricks and Minifigs Salem store claiming that this was over $200,000. They would also claim that they had never received records and documentation, even though we saw in Ben's video he had sent Joshua the actual consignment contract. And finally, they'd also claim that the store did not close due to the lawsuits made by Ben, but because their staff, including local teenagers, faced severe real-world safety hazards, stalking, and bomb threats. Now, of course, these things are very unfortunate and should never happen, okay, even in a case like this. But, of course, the timing does seem very coincidental, almost as if they cared more about the lawsuits than the safety of their staff. In any case, this would be the start of damage control, okay? This idea they were coping with, the fact that this was only going to last for a small duration of time and everything's going to go back the same way it was before, was just not happening. At some point, the CEO, Ammon McNeff himself, would get on a live stream on the channel ACOB to answer some questions, some concerns. This would be streamed on May 30th, 2026, and to be honest with you, it was really just a regurgitation of what we just saw in the blog post. Denying the fact that they ever stole anything, denying involvement, denying responsibility, denying accountability. Here's a small clip of him talking, and I mean, just listening to him for a minute is good enough to understand what he was there for.
My name is Ammon McNeff, and you'll forgive me. I am reading this so that the statement can be clear and concise, but I'm CEO of Bricks and Minifigs. And I want to speak directly, not through a blog post, not through an email, just directly to anyone following what's happened in Salem, Oregon. To the Mansell family, I am sorry that you are in this position. A family that loved Lego and trusted someone with their collection deserves better than what happened. That has always been our position, and it has not changed. Here is where we stand today. We want to hear from you directly. We want to help facilitate a resolution of this through the proper channels, and that has not changed. We are willing to sit down with you with a professional mediator, one you're comfortable with, bring the consignment agreement you and the previous owner of the Salem, Oregon store created, bring your inventory list, bring whatever documentation you have, and we're not asking for perfection, we're asking for cooperation. We will bring everything we have too, and we will go through it together. We want to see this resolved. Brian, that's it. That's the offer. A mediator, a table, documentation, and a genuine effort to get your family to a fair place. No cameras, no stunts, no manufactured drama, just a real conversation.
So this was the first half of this little clip, and I mean, the only thing going through my head is, took you long enough. I mean, it's about time. Like, it only took the destruction of the reputation of your entire company for you to do this, but I mean, about time, right? Better late than never, right? This was the only thing that Brian and Ben and everyone who fought for this wanted to begin with. This CEO was given the opportunity in the beginning of Ben's video when they spoke one-on-one to do it the easy way. He chose the hard way, and here we are now. He has to read a statement in front of everyone like a robot. The second half of this clip would be talking about how certain stores that are under the Bricks and Minifigs brand have been targets of harassment, sometimes even violence. And yes, of course that sucks. That's terrible, but no one else is to blame than CEO, Joshua, and Brandon, anyone involved in corporate, and the fact that Brian has been in a constant state of anxiety for the last 2 years. So cool offer, man, but would it have been really that hard to do it way earlier? But the thing is, this wasn't just about Bricks and Minifigs anymore. This was also about the extremely corrupt and disgusting American Fork Police Department. They were now in the crossfire. How come you guys are protecting Joshua so much like he's your mob boss? How come there's a warrant for Ben's arrest with no bail for something so stupid? He was only trying to serve Joshua his court papers. I mean, how come you pointed assault rifles at people for stolen Legos? On May 29th, American Fork PD would release a statement in which they deny all accusations. And then the next day, on May 30th, they would release a 26-minute video in which the chief of police of the American Fork Police Department makes a statement about this. Now, I want to preface this by saying this is probably one of the worst videos I've ever watched in my life when it comes to audio quality. Listen for yourself for a few seconds.
And I am the chief of police for the American Fork Police Department.
Guy is doing an ASMR statement. There are a few interesting bits here in the statement other than him just denying pretty much every accusation towards his very corrupt and disgusting police department. He'd claim that this raid that happened on the Airbnb with assault rifles and pistols was done because the Airbnb owner was the person that confirmed to the police that Ben and his friends stole Legos, which eventually led to the approval of the search warrant. Now, of course, the internet being the internet, they'd find out who the Airbnb owner is, and it turns out that, well, yes, he is a Mormon elementary school principal that is based in Utah. What's really interesting here, though, is like, how does the Airbnb owner even know that there are Legos in his own place when there are guests there? We'll find that out somewhat later. But for the time being, even with this knowledge in mind, it was still a very disproportionate reaction. Why do you need assault rifles for stolen Legos? That is just pure intimidation, especially when those Legos weren't there, when it was a bogus search warrant. Now, Ben would make a video titled My Response to the Police, responding to this statement, and in it he'd claim, well, listen, the entire body cam footage of you raiding the Airbnb was redacted. They were clearly hiding something, and the whole thing was very fishy. Now, here's something that's pretty funny. The chief of police would claim that Ben was lying about his dislocated shoulder. Why? Well, because in the video, when he was talking about having his shoulder dislocated, Ben would add an image of an x-ray of a shoulder being actually dislocated, right? But this is a left shoulder, and the shoulder in question that's being dislocated right now on video is the right shoulder of Ben. In his response, Ben would explain that yes, this is not my shoulder. This was a stock image, but my shoulder was actually dislocated. I know what that feels like. Like, what are you trying to do here? But yeah, overall, the rest of this was just the chief of police justifying the actions of his officers, even though we know that it's most likely corruption. He justified the stop sign search, even though they stopped at the stop sign. He would reveal to us that Joshua was actually planning to shoot Ben for harassment. He would say this on the phone, I'm about to shoot this guy, which is why the police intervened. But somehow, Joshua, with his intent of murder, did not get into any trouble. But what's really interesting, I find probably the most interesting thing in this whole statement from the chief of police, was that he'd claim that Ben got arrested because they found out that he had already served Joshua with papers on March 10th, and that he was only there to harass him for content. But in the body cam footage that was not redacted, we can see the officer asking the court, yo, what's the status of this case? And he would confirm with the person on the phone that the other person in this, Joshua, was yet to be served. This was done as Ben was waiting in the car.
Okay, so the defendant needs to be served with papers before the case will, I guess, start?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Dude, come on, like, seriously, like, man, I really try to be objective, you know, but like, even objectively, this is ridiculous. The cop right here just confirmed Joshua is yet to be served. What do you mean he already served? What do you mean this is why we arrested him? Like, come on. But of course, this guy was still yapping. I mean, he was just still talking as if there was no accountability at all at the American Fork Police Department. Because then he would say, oh yeah, by the way, the arrest warrant is justified because Ben is a stalker. You know, it's funny. If you're being stalked or know someone who's stalked, I would love to hear one example of the police taking it this seriously. Because usually the police in the entirety of the United States, if you have a stalker, they would tell you we can't do anything until he hurts you. And here, this guy literally did nothing. He was just trying to serve him papers. And look at how he's being treated with an arrest warrant with no bail, facing 5 years in jail. Incredible. And there'd be some other funny bits in this too, like how the police searched them for heroin, right, the drug search, because they thought the driver's pupils looked weird, and how they arrested his other friend for trying to delete evidence when all he did was lock his phone. So they were doubling down on that. Look, overall, you don't even need to hear my opinion about this. Look at the like to dislike ratio. I have never seen such a ridiculous ratio on YouTube in such a long time. I mean, seriously. 936 likes, 47,000 dislikes. No one was buying this. This statement was horrendous. And speaking of horrendous, in the description of this video, you'd see the following is a link to all body cam footage and police reports related to the incidents referenced in this video. Now, what they were trying to do is link you all the body cam footage that was redacted, right? That was censored, the ones that were sent to Ben as he was making his videos. But in American Fork Police Department fashion, they would absolutely fuck it up. They would release the body cam footage, yes, but none of it would be redacted. This was the raw recording of everything that had happened throughout the entirety of this case. At first, people thought that this was some sort of leak. Hell, even Reckless Ben released some of the footage on his channel and titled the video, "Someone Hacked the Police Department." But no, there was no hack involved. There was nothing like that. It would be a major crime if it was. In reality, the American Fork Police Department would make a statement on their Facebook page and would admit they were the ones who released the unredacted files by mistake. Now look, it could have been someone on the team that wanted the right thing to happen and did this because they thought the corruption was through the roof, or it could have been incompetence. I'll let you decide that, but if you had to ask me personally, I think it was incompetence. There's this one YouTube channel called BaM Sucks that uploaded every single bit of unredacted footage and even went as far as to upload everything on the Internet Archive as well, just in case his YouTube channel gets taken down, which is completely possible. This footage right here is extremely important because it shows what many have already been thinking, the fact that this police department is corrupt to the core. But as you can see, there are hours upon hours of footage here, so we're going to focus on the juicy bits, the ones involving Joshua. So there are some notable things here, you know, a lot of self-incriminating statements, a lot of, well, blatant corruption. One of the first instances where they're talking to him, he'd be asking the cop, hey, you know, would this be a crime you guys can charge him with? Like, does that work?
Harass them. So they're getting them on, I don't know, but some kind of interruption of commerce. Does that sound like a crime?
Does that sound like a crime? I don't know. You tell me, man. You're the officer. Here he tries to guilt trip a cop into helping him by using the example of his wife.
Would you be comfortable with this guy coming to your house and bugging your wife? Would you like that? No, I wouldn't.
This brings us to the next batch of footage, and this is when Joshua was trying to serve him papers. At this point, he casually asks the officers, hey, can you give this guy a stalking charge? You know, just get it over with.
Hold on. All right. What are you wanting done today? Besides, obviously, talk to...
As much as you humanly possibly can.
You want her trespass?
No. I want him for stalking.
Okay. That's something I can work through, but for right now, you want her trespassed?
Yes. That's all you can do.
Right now I can screen charges, but with them saying they're trying to serve papers, kind of puts me in a little bit of a bind. I understand you have a history with...
They're fake.
I understand you have a history with him, but for right now, again, I'm open to screening charges through our attorney.
That's what Ammon, the CEO of Bricks and Minifigs, said stalking was. So he sent that to me.
So see, even Ammon is involved, right? He's the one kind of pulling the strings, telling Joshua, yo, you can put him on stalking. This is technically stalking, whatever. But it's really interesting, this dynamic. I mean, this guy's sitting barefoot on the stairs talking to officers as if they're familiar with each other, as if they're friends. They probably are. They all grew up in the same town. They all happen to probably go to the same church. But this really does feel like I'm watching this officer talk to someone who is superior to him. Like, hey, what do you want done today? I can do trespassing. I want stalking. Yeah, I can work through that. And mind you, they're talking about the process server here too, the woman that Ben was with, who literally was just there to give him the papers. If you remember too, this officer was the one who had taken these papers to serve Joshua with, and then would come back to Ben and say, oh, I've never seen papers like this in my life. This is fake. Taking Joshua's word for it before calling the court and confirming that they're real. But then they just end up arresting Ben anyway, so who cares, right?
Oregon, right?
Yeah, it's hanging signs. They sent a lady in, and the lady's like, oh, I'm going to murder you to Amanda, the manager. And Amanda is she's a tough lady.
This never happened, by the way. No one told Amanda, hey, we're going to murder you. Nothing. No, none of that happened, obviously.
Mr. Schneider is just a YouTuber that got a hold of the story and then went to this guy and said, hey, if I can harass these guys and if I can do some stuff and get some money out of them, will you pay me some of that money? And that's what they're trying to do, is the individual who actually owes the money left the United States. They were one of our franchisees. They were terminated as a franchisee for violating all sorts of rules. They then fled to Europe somewhere. And so we've been trying to deal with this situation. We've been trying to help the person up in Oregon, but because we found out later that they've been all working together to try and force some money out of us. So we've had our attorneys working on it. We've been in contact with the Marion County Sheriff's Department, the Marion County District Attorney, the Kaiser, and this is all up in Oregon. And then they started flying down here, coming to our corporate offices, and now they're heading to our staff and other individuals' personal residences to just harass and continue to try and extort money out of them. And so there's already a case in Provo because they've been passing fraudulent documents up in Oregon. They created a fake contract, forged a manager's signature up there, threatened to kill her, all sorts of things. And all of this while he's wearing glasses that have a camera in it. I don't know if you see the
Is he wearing the glasses today? Yeah, he's wearing the glasses. Yeah, so you're...
So this was Ammon, the CEO, talking on the phone. So like all the boys are involved together, and what he was saying was definitely a reach. He would imply that Crystal, the person who had left the US, right, who used to own the Salem store that went to Europe, fled because she owed money. When in reality, we saw the security cam footage, she was lied to, and she was forced out. They would claim that Brian had hired Ben, and the whole point of this was just to make some money from the $200,000 owed. If that was really the case, then why does the GoFundMe exist? And again, with this whole lie that Amanda, the store manager, was threatened with murder. I mean, seriously, dude, this is all over the place. It's pathetic. Now, this right here is probably my favorite clip because you can just see his smug ass sitting on his stairs barefoot talking to the officers, where he says that these documents are fake and that this girl is a fake process server, and the cops just eat it up. They just believe him, you know, even though it's completely illegal for a cop to have papers like this and not give them to the person whose name is on them.
All right, she's been trespassed.
All right, hold on, Officer Sumbot is back.
Okay, she's been trespassed. Talking with him, he's telling me a different story. Again, I don't know all the specifics of your case. He is very adamant that he wants to serve you with papers. Okay.
That's fake. That's illegal. You can't pretend to be a process server.
So
you can't. That's illegal.
I've explained to him that you don't want to be served papers. He's got to figure something out. If it's, again, I don't know if there's an actual case right now in Oregon.
It's a Class A misdemeanor to impersonate a process server in the state of Utah.
So right now,
I want her arrested for impersonating a process server.
So right now, I've explained that to them and explained that he needs to go a whole different route about this and to not come onto your property as well as her.
No. I can't just go pretend. I can't go print up fake documents and go try to process serve people. That's illegal.
Okay. Have you two been to court before?
No, he can't. No, he's a YouTuber.
Okay, you've never been to court with him.
No.
So these papers that he printed up are
fake.
fake.
Yes, 1 billion, trillion, gazillion %.
Okay, never been to court with him or
never
anyone
been to
associated
court.
with
Nobody's ever been to court.
Okay.
He's a YouTuber.
Okay, what was the reason behind your store closing this month?
his harassment and
You guys shut
vandalism.
it down?
Yeah,
Okay. So on your own accord, you guys
on
shut
my
it down?
own accord. Yes.
Okay.
He can't be right. He's a YouTuber. Yo, this guy wants to sue you and has like a straight up court case, and he wants to serve you. He can't do that. He's a YouTuber. I also love how he's sitting there making demands from the officer. There really is some sort of a power dynamic here, and it's very uncomfortable to watch because it makes you think, how many other situations like this exist across the US with police? Probably quite a few. I mean, this guy straight up has the phone number of police officers, right? Joshua has phone numbers. Look at him calling an officer right here.
His name is Ben Schneider. He's stalking my house. Will you come to my house, please, and come get them?
So this is how the two patrol cars were able to find him immediately, right? Ammon had called Joshua, told him, yo, they're probably on their way. He saw them, he caught a glimpse of them, he maybe knew they were coming, called a cop's personal phone number. He didn't even call 911, right? And they were there ready at the scene in a bogus traffic stop. This is what we're dealing with here. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't clickbait. This isn't an exaggeration. This is corruption at its finest. These body cams also reveal to us the extent of the corruption that has to do also with the Airbnb. This was all bogus. They had a personal relationship with the Airbnb owner. Everyone knows each other in this place, okay? Watch it for yourself. This is just a game to them.
Go. Hey, come here. Do you remember we were doing Hydra with the guy with the deagle?
Huh?
Remember when we did Hydra with the guy with the Desert Eagle?
Yeah.
This is his Airbnb. He's in my truck right
Oh,
now.
really?
And that's so
Oh, yeah.
And I told people that. He was like, what the fuck? That's so funny. Detectives are going to have Orem come and look at these guys to see, because they have video surveillance of all their guys. So we'll keep them on ice until we can start stripping resources. But it sounds like the other shifts rolled in. They're starting to take calls.
They're starting to take calls, which is good.
Okay.
We'll make sure everything's cleared up.
Yeah, that was great. And the fact that they were coming out when we were walking up. The main kid had his phone recording, so I shut it off. But
The other kid had a GoPro. We're out of here.
AK-47, code 4.
Just gonna give him this copy of the warrant, tell him how it went. Or these douchebags probably have property. Oops. Shouldn't have said that.
Nothing like flexing a relationship with the Airbnb owner, nothing like calling these people douchebags even though you're meant to be an unbiased force of the law. These are not police officers, these are henchmen. These are mercenaries that are working for the sake of people that they value over others. And speaking of people valuing others, the internet, in all its glory, would find another missing piece of the puzzle. Ammon McNeff wasn't just some random Mormon in Utah. His brother, he has 3 brothers by the way, 4 sisters, one hell of a family, owns a professional law enforcement training company. This could explain his connection to the American Fork PD, right? How they're practically operating like his private army. When people say Mormon Mafia, this is what they mean. In corruption at such a large scale, I mean, people have been throwing around the word RICO, right? Something made specifically to go after mafias. Now look, this may be a stretch, but the fact that people are thinking of this when they think of this town and this police force and Ammon says a lot already. But I should mention this, okay, as I always try to in my videos. Just because there's a very bad apple who just so happens to be Mormon doesn't mean all Mormons are bad. In fact, residents that are under the American Fork Police Department are planning to protest them and their corruption after they found out just like the extent of it. And this was discussed on a Mormon podcast. So not all Mormons are bad, okay? Not all Mormons are part of some weird shady mafia, okay? They're very pissed that a dumbass Lego company was enough to destroy their reputation online. This corrupt police force needs to go. But enough talking about the police. Going back to Bricks and Minifigs, even the employees were starting to go rogue. Here's an employee saying, your local Bricks and Minifigs generates revenue to a corporate bully who weaponizes corrupt police and courts to steal from your local Lego community. Any revenue given to local Bricks and Minifigs stores supports this behavior, supports small businesses, not Bricks and Minifigs. I mean, this was it, guys. If you were into Lego, you were aware of Bricks and Minifigs. But now that you're aware of the controversy, no one's gonna go back there. Why would you sell your vintage Legos to someone that you know will scam you? And why would you go buy vintage Legos from someone you know that has scammed others and will probably scam you on the price too? Ammon could do as much as he wants in terms of damage control. He went on Fox, he went on multiple podcasts, whatever. Nothing's gonna work. He would actually announce on Fox that he was pursuing a lawsuit against Reckless Ben and Brian. But he would offer Brian a way out. If they just sat together and figured it out, he would remove him from the lawsuit. But we'll get to that later. In any case, it didn't make him look better at all. And speaking of things that didn't make him look better, the damage control would continue. On June 4th, Bricks and Minifigs would release another blog post on their website titled Bricks and Minifigs Parts Ways with Salem, Oregon franchise owners Brandon Best and Joshua Johnson. They would say that through their investigation, they'd uncover significant evidence of gross negligence in how the store was previously operated by the prior owner, as well as operational gaps during the transition and the subsequent management of document recovery. They'd also announced that they had reached out to Brian Mansell and his family to meet, to review documentation, and to come up with a mutual and positive resolution. However, they would want to yet again specify that the $200,000 figure was not accurate. This was at most $100,000 in total. So, you'd read this and you think, well, hey, at least you guys are taking a step in the right direction finally, right, after all this. But did it really take tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of views from different content creators to finally make you do this? Really? Like, for example, everyone knows that PayPal sucks ass. There are people out there who have maybe $10,000 in PayPal that can't even access their funds and can't speak to a single human. But we've seen this happen before where a content creator makes a tweet, it goes viral, and then within like 24 hours, PayPal's like, yo, here's your money back, No problem, sorry, apologies. It's like, if virality is the only way to get issues solved, then why would I ever trust you? And speaking of trust, well, as you might have guessed already, since they always take care of each other, someone would uncover this. When Bricks and Minifigs said they parted ways with Brandon Best about the Salem, Oregon store, they forgot to mention that Brandon owns a second store in Eugene, Oregon. Here's the paperwork proving it. Seeing that Brandon was just as culpable here as Joshua, and seeing that he was guilty of bullying, like whenever they wanted to get rid of a franchisee, they would just send him. This showed that Bricks and Minifigs made that statement just to try and save face, just to try and do some damage control. They didn't actually want to get rid of Brandon. And if you actually look at this piece of paperwork here that shows that he's an owner, you can see that there was someone before him that is withdrawing. Brandon is new. So it doesn't take a genius to understand this is the same situation as what happened to Crystal. Someone owned it, for whatever reason wanted to leave, got intimidated, kicked out, Brandon comes in, takes over, rinse and repeat. These guys weren't just friends or co-workers, they were lifelong friends. And Joshua actually served side by side alongside Ammon McNeff as Mormon missionaries. Look, you can see this in a newspaper article from 2004. God knows who the hell uncovered this, but it's real. Do you really think Ammon's going to get rid of Joshua? Do you really think he's going to be like, you know what, for the sake of this company, you should go? No. Even as direct suppliers like Minifigs.me would end all relationships with Bricks and Minifigs, they still didn't care, all right? Even their damage control was lackluster. Even their damage control was doing nothing but make it worse for them. They were getting review bombed, and even the police station involved in this was getting review bombed too, although those reviews are being removed. Regardless, the damage had been done. This was something unbelievable. A $400 million company. Its reputation in the gutter because they just couldn't figure out a solution. They were just ghosting someone who was genuinely concerned about the life savings of his dad. Bricks and Minifigs had essentially completely and entirely lost in the court of public opinion. But they were not planning on losing in the court of, well, in the legal court, in the court of law. They were doubling, or at this point tripling down on it, and things will potentially get very nasty for Ben and anyone involved. Here are the legal repercussions. So as I mentioned earlier, when Ammon went on Fox, he would mention that he was suing Ben and everyone else that was involved. Bricks and Minifigs was suing for defamation, disparagement, civil conspiracy, stalking, trespassing, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's a pretty extensive list, and that is, I'm pretty sure, separate from the arrest warrant in which Ben is also being sued for stalking and targeted residential picketing. So the guy was racking up a whole lot of legal problems while he's out here chilling in Mexico. But when I said that Bricks and Minifigs was going to play dirty, I didn't just say that for the sake of saying it, I meant it. they'd understand that a huge portion of Reckless Ben's income, in fact at this point I'd say the majority of his income, comes from Patreon because he posts his content here first before YouTube. So Bricks and Minifigs would send a takedown notification to Patreon telling them, please take down Ben's page immediately. Now look, I'm going to be completely honest and objective here. If this were to happen to anyone else, Patreon would have obliged, okay? I don't care. This could be someone who does charity. This could be someone who literally aids starving children on the daily. They would have taken down the page. They're not going to deal with the legal bullshit, okay? But in this case, Patreon saw a massive opportunity. They understood the situation and they felt, you know what? We could make bank on this. And they did. The CEO of Patreon would make a video saying, thanks but no thanks. He'd essentially be telling Bricks and Minifigs, go fuck yourself. Like, I don't care that you sent this notice. We're not going to do it. This was the easiest W he could ever ask for, right? And if you weren't aware of how big the situation was yet, I mean, now you do, okay? This prompted a CEO response because he knew that doing so would garner him 99.99% positive PR. That's just how much the situation was turning against Bricks and Minifigs. But also at the same time, let's not pretend that Patreon's a perfect platform. I've seen many people have their pages get taken down for no reason, just like PayPal. But with all this happening, even though Bricks and Minifigs trying their best to use legal means to bully, intimidate, and destroy the life of Ben and everyone else that was involved here, did they really stand a chance? I mean, come on. You watched this video so far, okay? I know it's been a while, but you've watched this whole video so far. It's obvious to anyone with a pair of eyes and ears that they're in the wrong, right? They're not going to win in court, right? Well, look, as I said, these guys play dirty, really dirty. And Ammon, the CEO, is no exception. In fact, if you look at his LinkedIn job history, you'd see that before acquiring Bricks and Minifigs, he actually used to work at a company called Legally Mine LLC. Now look, Legally Mine actually has been through some controversy of its own. This is an asset protection firm, and back during February 2025, it would be found to have been engaged in the unauthorized practice of law in Ohio by the Supreme Court of Ohio. They were providing legal advice in a place where they weren't allowed to provide any legal advice. So they've already been through the ringer legally. They know what they can get away with, and now they know what they can't get away with. So here's the deal. On June 4th, they would create a new LLC, a new company in Oregon at the address of the Bricks and Minifigs store in Eugene that is still ran by Brandon Best and also now Joshua Johnson. According to this account, this is a legal tactic. An LLC that dissolves cannot be the target of discovery to ascertain what the LLC did with the Mansell collection. So the Star Wars figurines. This is a circle. The wagons move from the founders of Legally Mine LLC. So look, how accurate is this? Somewhat accurate to a certain extent. The name of Ammon McNeff, the CEO, is on so many company registries, you could probably make an encyclopedia book out of it. So they've used this tactic before. They know what they're doing, okay? If they screw up in an LLC and it closes somehow before a lawsuit, the history of that LLC cannot be used in court in discovery. And discovery is usually when you discover, well, all the things that your opponent has done. In fact, here's something interesting. Reckless Ben, when he sued these people in small claims court with the 10 different lawsuits that amount to $100,000, the court would notify him that he had sued the wrong LLC. There was just so many different LLCs that, yeah, he got screwed over. They were able to close the store before he could file a new lawsuit to the correct LLC. So now he's suing both Joshua and Brandon personally as individuals. But that doesn't mean it'll be any easier either. Look, the channel Legal Eagle made a video titled "Everybody's Wrong About the Bricks and Minifigs Case." He pretty much talks about how it's really messy. Like technically, based on the contract, there should have been insurance on these Star Wars Lego sets. In an ideal world, okay, in an ideal world of adults, as soon as they would have noticed that there was missing Legos, they should have gotten insurance for those Legos, right? They should have gotten a payout and given the money to Brian. That's it. End of the story. But of course, they didn't. Legal Eagle also does confirm the fact that yes, this consignment is transferable to whoever owns the store. But even with those things in mind, the fact that it had gotten this far deep into not finding a resolution makes things a bit more complicated, especially with all the events that have already occurred. So overall, you walk away from this 50-minute video thinking, yes, this is way more complicated than it actually is. Based on many different factors and based on state law and based on how a civil suit goes in an unpredictable fashion, you don't know exactly who's wrong here. Whether it be Joshua and Brandon, whether it be Bricks and Minifigs corporate. But one thing is for certain, what happened to to Brian was wrong. But how are you going to prove that? Through litigation? It'll be so expensive that even if those Legos were worth $200,000, you're barely going to keep any of that money anyway. That's where it gets very, very tricky. But speaking of tricky, this is just talking about Brian, okay? And Brian is fully in the right here. When it comes to Ben, that's an entirely different story. And Legal Eagle does throw a bit of shade, jokingly, at Ben for doing things on his own, indicating that whatever's going to happen in his lawsuit's going to be way more complex than anything involving these Legos. And of course, he wasn't wrong. I wanted to end this video on a good note, saying that, hey, regardless of all these events, at least Ben was able to raise over $400,000 for Brian and his family. But on June 9th, everything would take a turn for the worse. The GoFundMe would be taken down. And the lawsuit of Bricks and Minifigs versus Reckless Ben, the thing they were suing him with, would go live. Additionally, you'd have Brian included in this too. So this whole empathetic act of Ammon getting on Fox News and saying, oh, Brian, we can figure things out, I'll remove your name from the lawsuit, that was all bullshit. What's even crazier here is that this complaint, this lawsuit, has 10 causes of action, which makes it a Utah RICO. This is what I mentioned earlier in the video. A RICO was something created to take down a mafia, and yet they were using this to try and take down a YouTuber who was helping someone get his Legos back. They'd want to charge him with defamation, injurious falsehood, civil conspiracy, tortious interference with existing and prospective economic relations, civil stalking, public and private nuisance, trespass, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Additionally, what's crazy here is that the judge seems to be as corrupt as possible. He would allow Bricks and Minifigs to serve Ben through email. This is something that Bricks and Minifigs had asked for specifically, and he had granted them that motion. This doesn't happen every day. This means that Ben cannot avoid this. He received the email. And what's absurd here is that there's a gag order that would get placed on Ben. He cannot speak on Bricks and Minifigs anymore, and although he was planning to release part 3 of his video series on Tuesday, the 9th of June, he wasn't able to. The judge would argue that Ben will suffer no legitimate harm if he can't upload anymore on YouTube. Make that make sense to me. Yeah, some guy will suffer no legitimate harm if he can't do his full-time job? Seriously? This is why many believe already that this judge is bought and paid for by Bricks and Minifigs. They also, of course, mentioned that he's most likely Mormon. Ben would announce this on his YouTube channel on the 9th of June, the day he was meant to upload episode 3 to his Patreon, and pretty much tell everyone that he just can't do anything anymore. He's completely silenced. He just has to go through with this lawsuit and hope for the best. The thing that's worrying everyone is the fact that he still hasn't retained a lawyer. He still doesn't have a lawyer to officially represent him. And when it comes to GoFundMe, it wasn't Reckless Ben's decision to take it down. It was GoFundMe that took it down. He'd make a post saying, they took down Brian's GoFundMe, sad face, I wish I could talk about it, but I'll go to jail if I do, because of the gag order, right? Actually, you know what? Don't worry, because this roller coaster just keeps going up and down like every single day. The GoFundMe page is back. Reckless Ben would confirm this in a post one day after it was taken down on June 10th and would say, maybe someday I'll be allowed to talk about what's going on behind the scenes. It's crazy. So again, he can't talk because of the ongoing lawsuit, but one can assume that Bricks and Minifigs sent a letter to GoFundMe very similar to the one that they had sent to Patreon. And now GoFundMe's like, nope, we're not going to do that. That's how far they're willing to go. They want to attack GoFundMe money and potentially take it for themselves, saying that this is for damages, the damages you caused to our business. This is just pathetically disgusting. But what isn't disgusting is the fact that citizens of this area are now in the American Fork City Council demanding accountability and saying that they've been living in fear of retaliation after seeing what their police, the American Fork Police Department, was willing to do to cover for Bricks and Minifigs, a corporation. I can't imagine what it's like to be a citizen there and witnessing these things. Like my own police force, the ones that are meant to protect me, will throw me under the bus just because of a corporation? No wonder they're pissed. Look, I want to be optimistic here, and I really wish Ben the best, but it's not looking good at all right now. Even if you were to get an amazing team of lawyers, a case like this is not going to end in a week, okay? This is going to take a very long time. In the meantime, though, I hope that no one forgets that this is going on. I hope that people stand up for Ben and make Bricks and Minifigs understand that they fucked up big time. This is a $400 million company who could have solved this overnight if they wanted to by doing the right thing, and instead, even though they have millions of eyeballs on them, they still decide to go with the route of bullying the smaller man. So for the sake of justice, for the sake of anyone out there that gets wronged by a bigger corporation, let's hope that he can make it through this and come out as the winner. Thank you so much for watching until the end. I really appreciate it, especially with how long this video is. God damn. If you want to see more content from me, then definitely check out my stacked.com page. It's like Patreon, but better. Prices start at $1. I love you so much, platonically, and I will see you in the next video, whenever that is. Take care. Mwah.